Welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. It's another week in which we take a dive into Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, announcing their withdrawal from the economic community of West African states. Last week, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso announced they were leaving the economic regional bloc. All three countries, all Junta-Led, had already been suspended from the bloc following the military takeover there. They said it was a sovereign decision to withdraw from the ECOWAS, which they said had drifted from the ideals of its founding fathers and the spirit of Pan-Africanism. In a communique they released on Sunday, they described ECOWAS as being under the influence of foreign powers, betraying its founding principles, and that the body had become a threat to member states and people and had failed to help them tackle the jihadist violence in their countries. Here's what we know for certain. Before the announcement, ECOWAS was in talks with the junta of these countries, trying to figure a path back to civilian rule. Needless to say, there was not much progress there, as those talks have been suspended, even though ECOWAS says it will continue to engage these governments in talks towards the direction. Last week, we spoke to the Executive Director, West African Network for Peace Building, Chukwemeka Eze, on how ECOWAS may have failed these countries. This is what he said.
Well, I think those countries, apart from Guinea, they were left with zero option, as it were, because ECOWAS was very, very rigid on its normative frameworks, especially as it relates to democracy and good governance. But they also wanted a leeway, and they felt that since they had a coalition of the willing amongst the three of them, probably it is the best thing to do, which is to leave the ECOWAS commission or community. But in any case, everybody knew that at the end of the day, the language of the junta was tilting to that. But what we did not know is that it will come to a point where they will, as it were, exit fully from ECOWAS, even when they, in my opinion, understand the implication of that.
Yes, and it seemed rather odd because ECOWAS was really lenient, with these countries. They had sent, emissaries. They had sent delegations to all of the three countries at the times of their military transition. They sent delegations to speak with the junta. They tried to reason with them. They said, okay, you really need to restore civilian rule, in these countries, but they insisted that they would go on with their own plans. So ECOWAS wasn't being rigid, was it? ECOWAS was actually being lenient. And it seemed like, ECOWAS gave them such a long time, because if you look at, Burkina Faso, when the military came, Mali, and then Niger, which just happened last year, up until now, it just seemed like ECOWAS had been lenient with these countries, allowing them to make up their minds and make up the rules as they go.
Amara, the truth of the matter is that I think people should be faithful to what they sign on to. And for me, ECOWAS has done all that it should do. Number one is that there is an existing protocol on democracy and good governance, and it's a normative framework that all the heads of states and governments of the ECOWAS community signed on to. So here is ECOWAS with its own member states violating that normative framework they signed on to, which is zero tolerance to unconstitutional changes of government, no matter the circumstance. And then there is a coup d'etat in Mali, followed by Burkina, followed by Niger, and subsequently even without adding Guinea. So what will ECOWAS do? Adhere to its normative framework or fold its hands and watch the junta take us back to the military era? So ECOWAS, as far as I'm concerned, like you said, have been not just lenient, but over lenient in terms of application of its rules and procedures. But what we are seeing is a situation where there is an interplay in West Africa, as it were, for the new partition and scramble for Africa. And West African region happened to be the theater for the outplay of all those shenanigans, including the geopolitics surrounding both Russia, France, and all of that. But ECOWAS as an entity must live by its rules and regulations. Otherwise, it loses its own identity. And so when this junta were asking for leniency and time to return to military rule without even a time frame, ECOWAS needed to do what it's supposed to do, which is you can't take more than the required time that is allotted to you. And even with the extension of these time frames, these juntas still did not think that it was time to give up leadership. I was in Mali last year at a conference where the junta openly told the participants that Mali was not interested in whether it is military or democracy. What they were interested in was good governance. But on the streets of Bamako today, there is no light. The security, which was what they touted as the reason for intervention in the truncating the democracy of Mali, the security has gotten worse in all of these countries. Security has gotten worse, economy has gotten worse, politics has gotten worse. So what is left for ECOWAS other than to maintain its stand and say, return to military rule?
Perhaps you would probably support what the Nigerian president, who's the ECOWAS chair, what he said last year when the coup happened in Niger. He said all options are on the table, including the use of force. I know it caused a lot of uproar last year, but I mean, now in hindsight, do you think that that was probably an option that he could have, that the ECOWAS could have pursued even further?
The truth of the matter is that the chair did not make those proclamations from nowhere. They were all part of ECOWAS protocols. You engage in the 3 Ds: diplomacy, dialogue, and deployment. Those were all on the table. And for goodness sake, if we could do that in the Gambia, why not in any other country? So ECOWAS will lose its relevance if it does not exist within the paraphernalia and parameters of its normative frameworks. And these were all signed on to by these heads of states and governments. So where do you blame ECOWAS? If they say all options are on the table, including, of course, dialogue, including, of course, diplomacy, why should everybody focus on deployment, which is the last option, as it were? So I agree fully that these were not invented. They were all part of existing normative frameworks within the ECOWAS protocols.
I just want to read ECOWAS communique, which has just been released. It says the attention of the ECOWAS has been drawn to a statement broadcast on the national televisions in Mali and Niger, announcing the decisions of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger to withdraw from ECOWAS. ECOWAS says the ECOWAS Commission is yet to receive any direct formal notification from the 3 member states about their intention to withdraw from the community. The ECOWAS Commission is, as directed by the authority of the heads of state and government, has been working assiduously with these countries for the restoration of constitutional order. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali remain important members of the community, and the authority remains committed to finding a negotiated solution to the political impasse. ECOWAS is saying it had no idea. It's received no formal notification. So at this point, where exactly do these countries stand in ECOWAS, and what does ECOWAS do?
As an institution, we have contacted our national offices and they confirm that those statements are correct. But it's also possible that ECOWAS may not have received those communications. So it doesn't make it right or wrong. However, I think at this point, what is important is to understand that there is that intention and that the government, as it were, the junta government of these countries are willing to leave ECOWAS. Of course, there will be consequences, both on its government and citizens, as it relates to the ECOWAS procedures. So at this moment, probably ECOWAS has not received an official copy of the memo, but we have been informed by our national offices that indeed those statements actually originated from the governments of those countries.
So I suppose that even by now, even without receiving a formal notification, the mere fact that, this is out there in the public space that these three countries are already withdrawing from ECOWAS, what usually would be the procedure for leaving a regional body like ECOWAS?
Well, the truth of the matter is that I am of the opinion that those statements originated from the government rather than the people. So probably it will still go through a process. And because they are not under a democratic regime, ECOWAS would discountenance those statements, because in the first place, the regime that is issuing those statements are illegitimate. So I don't think that ECOWAS will end up suspending the people of those countries. But they will probably put more sanctions. They probably engage more in diplomacy to ensure restoration of democratic government. The junta does not have the right within the procedures of ECOWAS to make those statements. Of course, they are in charge of government, but it doesn't mean that the people of those countries have spoken. And to that extent, they remain members of the community, and continuous engagement will be pursued to ensure that they return to democratic order.
So here's the update from last week after the junta announced their withdrawal. And by the junta, I mean the military governments of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. ECOWAS released a statement announcing knowledge of the withdrawal, as it had received no formal notification. The African Union, through its Commission President Moussa Faki Mahamat, said it feels deep regret over the withdrawal of the three countries. And the AU also calls on regional leaders to intensify the dialogue between the ECOWAS leadership and the three aforementioned countries, and indicated willingness to provide all assistance in its power for the success of the logic of fraternal dialogue, far from all external interference from wherever they come. Nigeria expressed sadness over the announcement by the three countries. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Nigeria stands with ECOWAS to emphasize due process and shared commitment to protect and strengthen the rights and welfare of all citizens of member states. So, Dr. Wokolo, thank you for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. I want to begin, with what has already happened. It's been 1 week since Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali released a joint communique announcing their withdrawal from ECOWAS. Now, before the announcement of the withdrawal, what were, the gains that these countries made from ECOWAS while they were still members before announcing the withdrawal?
Okay, thank you. When you want to look at the gains are enormous for everyone who is part of the union, both those who even Mauritius that left at a certain time. So if you look at 1975 when ECOWAS was formed, it was formed as an economic commission, a regional economic commission. From then, it transcended into other areas, political, security, and all that, just trying to partner itself after the European Union. Now, if you look at gains, the gains included issues of trade, issues of security. So the gains are enormous. It might be, if we start trying to list a lot of them, there's so much. However, it is really important to understand that all the countries did not gain the same way. Some may have gained more than the other, either because of their strategic position or because of issues of population, or their economy was growing at a different rate at the period of the formation of ECOWAS. For the three countries we are looking at, like Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, if you look at their gains, the other part of the countries, like Togo, Ghana, Nigeria, who are the lower part of the structure, offered them opportunity for them to use their seaport because they're kind of landlocked. So these are part of the gains. These are part of the economic gains of being part of that union. And then for trade and other things, they equally afforded them such opportunities. So the gains are there. So one cannot deny that.
What kind of options are open to them now that they're pulling out of ECOWAS? Where could they look to for trade and for other diplomatic relations?
So for me, this is where when I reflect over the issue, I felt, was it that the other members of the union did not smell the coffee, especially when last year, around September, they came up with alliance of Sahel states, where they talked about economic, political, security cooperation amongst the three of them. I think for me, that was the signal. That was the signal that the other union could have come in to say, no, we think this, we don't understand what this separate arrangement is all about. So if you look at it, you find out that if they currently are under suspension and they're able to survive, getting some of their a kind of economic security arrangement with Russia and China, and where the ECOWAS or the other part of the other members of the union are no longer cooperating with them and they're able to have survived over this period, then I think to them, they will be thinking, okay, so if we can survive without them, that means we can actually survive. So that's why, if you look at it, there was a period, a lot of people were saying there was need to review the sanction, look at the sanction with a human face and see if there are other diplomatic route to resolving the issue. So if they had survived over this period out of the union, then they might be thinking we could as well leave the union.
Do you think the ECOWAS sanctions on Burkina Faso, on Mali and Niger were too much for them to handle?
Yes, I felt the sanctions were too much. I felt we did not take into cognizance the mood of those nations. We did not understand. There were some internal dynamics in those countries that we were only looking at what the protocol said without looking at if there were other routes or other means of trying to resolve the issue. For instance, if you look at Niger, the issue was we understood the issue of the military takeover, but there were other internal contradictions, which I think is very important that ECOWAS start looking at those internal contradictions and issues. In Niger, we found out that even though Mohamed Bosso was removed, the people did not take to the street against the military intervention, meaning that something was fundamentally wrong. Issues of good governance and other dynamics that shaped the issues were not well looked at. Now we are seeing a situation in Senegal where the Senegalese president has suspended an election that should take place in February. If there is a reprisal or a military coup in Senegal tomorrow, what we won't be saying? I think there's need. This is not even about the ECOWAS as itself. The heads of states should look themselves in the mirror and tell themselves the truth. They are the ones, fueling most of these situations we are witnessing, where people are changing constitution, changing issues, and other presidents are not telling themselves the truth and say, why are you changing the constitutions of your country to remain in power? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? These are some of the things that are very critical. So to them, I felt this was harsh. We didn't look at it, outside the protocol to find a way of resolving them.
Yeah, and it seemed like, these countries were justified in what they said about ECOWAS, that it did not care about their economic state, did not care about the security situation, that ECOWAS went ahead and announced these sanctions, isolating them from the rest of the economic bloc, and therefore they have learned to, live without ECOWAS. But You mentioned Senegal, and that's a pretty interesting situation that you have mentioned because the president, as you rightly mentioned, has postponed the elections indefinitely. Now, ECOWAS has called for on the authorities of Senegal to expedite the various processes in order for a new date to be set. What should ECOWAS do in this regard, apart from releasing a statement like this and calling on the government to intervene? If it has learned anything from the situation in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and in Niger, what should ECOWAS' line of action be in Senegal?
The protocols setting out ECOWAS is even where we need to start reviewing a lot of things. The problem is not with ECOWAS as an institution. The problem is not with ECOWAS as an institution. The problem is with the member states, the heads of states of these countries. This is where the problem is from. So my question might be, what's the actual difference between what President Sake of Senegal has done with what, what's the difference between that and what took place in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and in Niger? They're just like 6 and they have a dozen. They're the same. So that's where we need to start. There are some protocols, ECOWAS protocols, that need to be changed. What the president of Senegal is doing is actually nothing but a civilian coup. Nothing more than that. He has even tried before to change the constitution and he failed. Now, few months or few days to an election, he suspends it. So they are just the same thing. So apart from the fact that ECOWAS might call on him, I think it's now left for other heads of state, especially the president of Nigeria, who is the president of ECOWAS or chairman of ECOWAS, to all of them to prevail on him to allow the election to hold. Otherwise, we are dealing with issue where civilians are pushing the military back into power.
But so I was saying that it appears to me that, and I think that some people would agree, that ECOWAS is falling apart. I mean, the fact that these 3 countries have withdrawn, it just shows you how deep the fault in ECOWAS goes. That countries are losing their faith in the regional power and even losing faith in Africa, where you find many governments just doing as they want to, interpreting democracy as they would like, and not really understanding, what system of governance really works for them. And then the regional and continental bodies not really knowing how to call countries to order, having no serious powers when it comes to enforcing good governance in those countries.
Yes, I think I understand what you're trying to infer here. Incidentally, what we are seeing here is each time you have unions like this, there's always a hegemon. The hegemon that tries to guide everyone and pull everyone along. So in West Africa, Nigeria is the hegemon. But of course, you could see that we are almost like a tiger with a broken leg. So it cannot even guide its territory. So because of the way Nigeria is struggling with its own internal contradictions and issues, security issues, economic issues, I really don't want to say political issues, but we can understand what's happening in the country. So with that, who is Nigeria now to tell others what to do? Because even within you, you cannot even show that strength that you're powerful. So, and again, if I look at the issue of Senegal, the 4 or the 5 countries that are the big countries that are the ones that have been guiding, that have been showing the way, in the region has been Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and then Cote d'Ivoire. So with what is happening now, Senegal is now beginning not to go the other way. So, it falls back now on Nigeria and Ghana especially. Cote d'Ivoire, we saw what happened last time. So mostly the bulk now rests on Nigeria and Ghana. Probably Cote d'Ivoire to start putting the the commission and the region back, into what it should be. Nigeria has an issue already, but I believe that if President Tinubu, who is the current president, can do something, get Nigerian experts, get West African experts to think through how to start redesigning most of the protocols and every other thing that could start galvanizing the region together. And I think it might be another way of trying to put ECOWAS, into front light, and so that we can start getting the ECOWAS that we deserve.
I guess that's where we'll leave it. Dr. Ndowokolo, thank you again for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel. And this is where we end the program this week. Thank you for watching. As always, I look forward to reading your comments or questions. You can send them using any of the social media handles showing on your screen. I'm Amarachi Obani. I'll see you next time.